Between 1949 and 1974, Professor Nikolaus Pevsner, a German émigré art historian, toured the counties of England, compiling a 46-volume guide to every building he thought was of interest, from Stonehenge to Centre Point. Pevsner's guides, regularly updated, are unique. Nothing quite like them exists anywhere else in the world.
Shortly after the war, in the great publishing boom that started then, Sir Alan Lane asked my wife and myself out for a weekend to their country house, and we were sitting in the garden, and he said to me, now, if you could do exactly what you would like to do with penguins, what would you? And I had the answer ready then, of course, and one was the Buildings of England, the other one was the Pelican History of Art, this big handbook which I only edit, whereas the Buildings of England, of course, I write. And when I had told him that one would involve 50 volumes and the other would involve 50 volumes, he said, yes, that's all right, we can do them both, and that was that.
The logistical burden of producing the Buildings of England obliged this most unmilitary of men to pursue quasi-martial campaigns. Twice a year for 5 weeks until her death in 1963, Lola Pevsner would drive her husband round a county, initially in a borrowed car.
They had breakfast and they would get in the car at about 8:30, 9 and drive off to their first village, house, church, whatever.
Well, that is a complete church. That's odd, because pretty well all major abbey churches or priory churches were ruined after the Reformation. I wonder why they spared this one.
They would drive and observe all day until about 6, with probably about half or 3/4 of an hour break to eat a sandwich, which they carried. And he would visit, look, and write comprehensive notes on the spot.
So that looks as if that part is later, or at least that the windows are put in. And yes, there is the North Portal, and that is unmistakably what, first half of the 30th century, these capitals with those kind of croquetty leaves and dogtooth ornament is again something which just doesn't occur before.
Pevsner's method was to initially scrutinize a building's exterior in order to determine the phases of its construction. Then he'd go inside. Then he'd compare his findings with notes prepared for him by his researchers.
Look, Ted, I'm still rather worried about these book cupboards. I can't find them in the extracts. I wonder whether you can.
I think we've got something on them.
Well, now for Barrow. Mind that dog. Now for Barrow, we go straight along here. You can't do anything else. And at the top you turn right, and then the A road goes straight into Barrow.
At 6 o'clock they would get to their bed and breakfast or wherever it is they were staying, and they would have a meal. And as soon as the meal was over, he would sit down and write up the day, and he would write until about midnight, and he would get up again at about 6:30 and finish off. And by breakfast, it was essential that he had finished writing the draft of that part of each volume that resulted from the previous day's visiting, because he assumed always, I'm sure rightly, that if you left it even for a day, it would be gone.
When Pevsner finished the last volume, Staffordshire, in 1974, he had been at it for 29 years and had listed over 100,000 buildings, a feat of heroic stamina which no one will ever repeat, not least because no one will need to now we've got Pevsner.
The Buildings of England are marvellous. They have opened everyone's eyes, I think more than any critic since Ruskin, to the joys of architecture. You go into houses and offices up and down the country, and people will talk about buildings and will say, oh, it's in Pevsner, have you seen Pevsner? It's a wonderful achievement for which I, as one of his pupils, am eternally grateful.